Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Tips Straight from the Pros. I'm your host, Trevor Henson, and with us today, we have a good friend and colleague, Dan Lewin. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Trevor. Happy to be here.
Yeah, man, glad we could hook up, especially given the situations in Los Angeles right now. Yes.
Yeah.
I do hope everything is okay with you, family-wise, and everything with the fires. I meant to ask that
Yeah,
earlier.
we're pretty far from it down here in Long Beach, but definitely no people affected, as I'm sure
Right. Yeah.
everybody does. And this has been historic and incredibly sad.
Yeah, absolutely. I got nine good friends, three pledge brothers from my fraternity at USC that lost their homes in Palisades, and it's just you can feel it, right? It
Yeah.
feels like I'm involved. It's like, but
Life can
all,
change so fast. It's
but in a day,
yeah.
as we learned in COVID, in one day,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
It's been
so
a historic start to the year for sure. But it's
it,
been amazing to see people come together too and support each other. And there's been a ton of those stories,
I've seen
real
I've
estate
seen
and
so much
healthcare.
love going around,
Yeah.
like just like support, and it's uh it's it's amazing what the good people can do when something like this happens. Like
Yeah.
all boundaries and barriers are crossed.
Yeah. Look for the helpers,
And
like Mr. Rogers said.
right, yeah, look, yeah, exactly. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. It's just to be just as respect for those who are who have lost their houses and have family members and such. I don't have any family members, but I have some really close friends, and my prayers are with them every night. And we're still not out of it, but praying that
Yeah.
dang wind does.
For the
So,
worst of it, hopefully.
well, yeah. Uh, so without further ado, I didn't want to just go into this and be like, yeah, it's not happening right now, because that's what's happening
Sure.
right now. So
For
thank you for
sure.
coming on anyway. Uh, so a little bit about Dan. Dan Lewin is co-founder of YoungLewin Advisors, a real estate brokerage focused on multifamily and student housing assets in Greater Los Angeles region. With over 1 billion in transaction experience, Dan is a leader in the student housing brokerage space and has been one of the most active agents in the market around the most famous and best university in the world, the University of Southern California.
Right
Right
on.
on.
Love it.
In addition to his brokerage activities, Dan also co-founded a property development company, Young Lewin Capital, that owns 30 properties in various stages of development, including student housing, co-living, micro-unit studios, ADUs, and conventional multifamily. Dan is a passionate advocate for pro-housing policies and is an avid supporter of the Yes in My Backyard, love that, YIMBY movement in California. I subscribe to that one too.
Yep. Good
Dan
answer
lives
to the
in,
NIMBYs.
yeah, the MBs. Let's build those ADUs in our backyards.
Yep.
Dan lives in Long Beach, California with his wife, continuing to innovate and give back through his work in real estate. Thank you for your, being on the show, Dan.
Thanks, Trevor. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Good summary.
Well, thank you. Thank you. My people try. So, diving right in, can you share how your journey in real estate investment started at USC and what motivated you to continue the pursuit of it? I know it's difficult to pursue real estate sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. My journey in real estate started, I guess, growing up. My dad's a structural engineer up in Palo Alto in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I was always working construction jobs in the summer through contacts of his. So that's kind of how I got exposed to property. And then when I got to USC, I was at Marshall Business School and I joined the mentor program. And I got the chance to choose a mentor. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that point. I was, midway into sophomore year and, more focused on being on 28th Street on Fraternity Row than the business school. But I got connected to a guy, Rich Oswald, who was working at a company called Turnstone. It was
Hmm.
led by John Ward, and they're based in Gardena. You might know John. And they at the time were doing a lot of 1 to 4 unit distressed fix and flip properties. They had been doing that for some time, but around 2008 to 2014, the focus had shifted to a buy and hold portfolio. They were backed by Colony and Tricon American Homes, in the wake of the great financial crash,
Yeah.
buying up the distressed properties. And so I was doing acquisitions for them, running around South LA, sourcing properties off market, on market, MLS, REO, foreclosure, that kind of stuff, and really cutting my teeth. I got $700 per house that I found for John, and
Wow.
yeah, that bought a lot of McDonald's and beer around the fraternity house. So I was felt very overpaid for doing that, but also learned a ton from that experience. So
Wow.
that's kind of how I got to it. And then when I graduated in 2014, that the distress market was winding down, right? Things had kind of
Right.
recovered at that point. And so through John, he introduced me to a guy, Steve Bogievis, Bogey, as he's known.
Bogey.
But yeah, he's a legend of the game for sure. And he's at Marcus and Millichap. And so I went and was a junior agent there, working and primarily South Bay apartments. But then I transitioned to USC student housing sort of
Hmm.
after about a year or two and focusing up by this where I had just gone to school.
Love the story. One question in there, Dan, was how did you get connected with John? Maybe I missed it while you were at USC because I didn't realize you would. I mean, $700 per house when you're at school. I mean, I had $300 a month like allowance, and that was about
Mhm.
how from my like grandparents when I was at school. Like it's $700 a house. Like you were rolling.
Yeah, it was meaningful.
How'd you meet him and how'd
So
that get
my
started?
mentor, the Marshall
He introduced
School
you.
mentor program, Rich, he was raising capital for John, and
Ah,
Rich mentored me too, but John was the more active principal, and
got
so
it.
who I ended up working with the most, and so I went and worked for their company, kind of starting out as an intern, and then
Yeah,
quasi property management, property acquisitions, and got my license while I was there, and kind of just the rest is the rest is
very
history.
cool. I
Yeah.
that's a very good plug for the USC Marshall mentorship program, by the way.
For sure. I mean, it was, I would always tell my parents, it's not the grades you make, it's the hands you shake. And I was doing that to defend the poor grades, the mediocre grades I was making.
I'm
Uh, but,
working.
but that ended up, I mean, it ended up being right to some extent. So
Here you are,
yeah,
owner of your own company, right? I
yeah,
mean, these get degrees. Don't tell my
right.
daughters that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
B's got me degrees, but yeah,
He's got me degrees as well.
yeah.
So that after after you with time with John, I assumed you now is John part of your company now? I think that's in
No,
the past now.
Turnstones, they're still active. They're a
You're still
syndicator,
active, right? Right.
locally and around the country. Yeah.
Got it. Right. I think he works with Jerry Marcel and those guys a little bit
Yeah.
here and there. Right.
Hmm.
That's how I think I know him through. Big player,
For sure.
but right?
Awesome guy to know and taught me so
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Oh, I imagine. I can only imagine that. So you're very fortunate to have a mentor as such. And for all those out there in TV land listening, mentor at in college level is, as Dan can see, as Dan is just showing us, key. I didn't do that, and I should have. I don't even know what if there was a mentorship program when I was there. I graduated in '02. Um, and I don't remember hearing of anything like of such. So either I was too much involved in 28th Street to find it, or it just didn't exist yet. But that's the first time I've heard this on our show that someone's come from found a mentor
Okay.
at school. And that's why I'm emphasizing it because that's a path.
Yeah.
I didn't find a mentor until I was 30 and I already had the company going, and I would have been way better off having one when I first started school
Yeah.
somewhere along to get me going. So thank you for sharing that, Dan. Uh, Secondly, what challenges did you face breaking into this crazy market of Los Angeles? I mean, it's competitive as it gets. And how did you overcome them?
Yeah. When I got to Marcus and Millichap, I was cold calling, which is what you do at Marcus and Millichap, and they assigned me to Hawthorne, Inglewood, Gardena, kind of B cities in the South Bay.
Mhm.
Um, And I was doing okay, but I was not getting a ton of traction. I don't have a background from LA. I don't have a network here. I was just sort of, I think, one of many pitching the Marcus and Millichap platform to the greater South Bay, but what happened for me was I was finishing up one class at USC while I was working at Marks and Millichap, and so I had, graduated, but had one to finish up. And so I was going to USC twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday, right in the middle of the workday. And so I decided to try and be efficient with my time and call around that area as well. So I'd try and call and book meetings with owners around the time I had class, so it wouldn't be a wasted trip. And that really was changed the trajectory of my career for
Really?
sure. I really found a lot of traction there, and I had a niche that I brought more to the market than just another Marcus and Millichap cold call jockey calling the South Bay. I knew the areas, I knew what streets were good streets, what street were bad streets, and at USC, it's right down to, on the west side of campus, you're near the computer science school. So that attracts a certain kind of tenant. And then Annenberg's further on the north side of campus, and Marshall, and so I could really walk the walk and talk the talk. And so I found much better traction there. And so I think the way I got through that, getting my start competition part was
Hmm.
finding a niche where I really was able to add value. And then quickly from there, around USC, it was all small lot development. So pre-ADUs, but everything around there is zoned for 2 to 10 units, depending on the size and the specific
Right.
zone. And so what people were doing back then was they would buy a house from somebody who kind of just coming out of the '08 recession, at least psychologically, get it at a good price. It's sort of quasi South LA, lower values. And then they tear it down and they build 4 3-bed units, and they'd rent each of those bedrooms to USC students, or they'd keep the house and build in the back and some points. And so I got really good at understanding the development potential and the laws and the zoning of the sites. And I was helping bridge the gap between, unsophisticated homeowners or very small investors. A lot of times they would have inherited it from parents or something like that. And then there was a network of developers up there that I got to know real well. And, those guys are always making direct offers to the owners in the area, but I would, kind of get in the middle and say to those owners, let me represent you, and, make all the developers negotiate, and bid on your site. And so that was how I got, and I had a much more,
That's
I think, compelling pitch than just, hey, I'm with Marcus and Millichap, and we have, 85 offices and 1,800 agents. And, if you've ever been cold called by a M&M guy, you know the pitch. And there's a lot of value to M&M, and I love M&M for certain things in parts of my life, but it's you don't really stand out. And so I was able to stand out in the USC market that way.
That is a fantastic niche. That question, I see how you could find the sellers, but how did you get introduced to the developers just to put the whole, that's a big piece when you come with developers with cash that are ready to compete on a lot and putting those two pieces together.
Yeah,
Walk
well,
me
I
down how.
didn't, I mean, I didn't invent the business model. By the time I was
Oh,
in it
oh,
in 2014, 15, the wave had started around 2012, 2013. So I was able to cold call, the people who own the finished properties as well.
right.
And those guys actually were often a lot friendlier and happy my biggest client up there, John Gwell, Southland Development, when I called him, our first meeting wasn't about any specific, deal. It
Ah,
was just he said, "Oh, I'm almost done with my property on 36th Place, and I'd love to come show it to you." And now being on the other side of it, having my own properties, if I got cold called and somebody wanted to go tour my property, I'd be excited to show it off because you work so hard. And so if
right.
anybody hears this and wants to cold call me, you can probably close me for a meeting if you say you want to tour one of my properties. But that's how I met John, and John and I did, I don't know, 25 30 deals together
Wow.
in the heyday there. So yeah, just all different types. And then when you have properties listed, they find you as well, right? And so that
Right.
started to snowball on itself.
That's very interesting because a developer will answer their phone. That's true. And they're easy to, they usually want to be found. So I can see that you can probably just give them a
Yeah,
call and say, hey,
more
I got
so
some
than the average
properties that,
homeowner who's
right, right.
usually like a telemarketer.
Right.
Yeah.
And did you go literally knock on doors or how are you finding the phone numbers of the homeowners?
I knocked on it. I mean, we had LexisNexis at Marks and Millichap,
Ah,
and we had
right,
the two people search and white pages, and there's ways to look it up. You
sure.
get the name and the address of the person on a title search, and then you
Right.
can you can look up. You'll call 5 different phone numbers, and two of them will be disconnected, and one's a fax machine, and one's the guy's mom who has no idea why you're calling, and then you find the person. It's all different number of things. I knocked on a few doors, but for the most part, it was calling. Yeah.
All right. Just curious because I was just thinking because I mean, you're in that area and it was there was residential. I mean, when I went to school down there, you didn't leave the little like Exposition, Jefferson,
Yeah,
Figueroa Square, or things got crazy.
yeah. It's still I mean, it's still a transitional area, but
Right.
I mean, even when I was there as a student 10, 12 years
Better.
ago, you could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was, yeah. When I was there, you couldn't even walk from the Coliseum at night. With it didn't.
Yeah.
It was advised against it. Now it's like Westwood down there. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like
They're building
it's,
more and more, and it's going all the way
wow.
down to MLK now.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I mean, so student housing. That's the I know we'd take a little bit of a tangent on that. Is how do you like student housing versus traditional multifamily? Like, what's that like? The first I've spoken to that's even in the student family game,
Okay.
student housing game.
I got you. Well, student housing has pros and cons. It has the big pro, I think, of being a way of owning residential, rental, residential, multifamily in California, but being largely insulated from the anti-landlord laws that are
Ah,
so negative to us here, right? Some of the properties are non-rent control because they're newer construction. Some of them are rent control, but students turn over every 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 years at most, right? So you never have long-term tenants. I own a handful of market rate apartments, and I've had, especially in COVID, right, as we all did, a lot of issues collecting rent and eviction moratorium and all that kind of stuff. I
yeah,
also own quite a bit of student housing. We never had any issues with that, right? They're
really,
backed by parental guarantees, right? So, especially at a USC, I mean, you've got so
right.
much income backing it. But even beyond that, just students aren't in it to be professional tenants, and they're sort of the opposite of that. And to that end, you get that a lot with the question of, oh, students, are they rough on the place? And they are, but if you're renting a 3-bed unit for $6,000, $5,000, and you get a deposit that matches that, it's hard to do that much damage. I mean, holes in the
It really
drywall and a
is.
broken window here. I mean, I think we've only once or twice had the damage go over the security deposit, and then you can go after the parents, and they'll typically pay it because they know it's
Yep.
legitimate. So what's
Yep.
I think the con of student housing is it's more operationally intensive, right? So you
Is
have
it
to lease it.
right?
You have to lease it every year,
Right.
and and not only that, but it's if you have in your, you guys manage a lot of conventional multifamily, and if you're over the market, you're going to find out, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks of leasing. Hey, the market's too high. Okay, lower it till you get there. With student housing, if you miss the leasing window and now it's October, you've missed the school year and now you're in a bind, right? So the stakes are high each year to get it right. And so you have to either be professionally doing it yourself or have a manager who understands the game. Now, a developed market like USC, there are a lot of good managers, Moxie, Orion, Stuho, Mosaic. Those are all guys that, are active, and you can, I believe they all do third-party management, but you have to, you do have to baby the asset a little more. But overall, yeah, I think it's the main thing that I'm interested in scaling as an asset class, as an owner. Yeah.
So would you say you're more focused on student housing scaling than multifamily at the moment?
I've always been student housing focused. As a broker, that's where I've focused. We own a handful of properties at Long Beach State and Chapman. I don't own at USC. That's kind of where I broker. And then we have some ADU development projects at other schools to kind of keep that separate. We're also building a 50 unit and a 100 unit in downtown Long Beach that are all micro. I mean, they're called micro units. It uses the micro unit ordinance. They're 450 square foot studios, so they're not micro, really. They're, New York, Manhattan, Murphy bed units. But on the development side, our business model is, it's all YIMBY related. Of we're able to buy land at values that are below what it should be priced at from sellers who don't understand the value of what can be built there, right? And that's what my clients were doing at USC in the beginning days. And now the USC market's more mature, so people
Hmm.
know what you can build. But when the ADU laws changed, we realized, hey, we can do the same USC model at other schools where the owners aren't wise to the value of their backyards, because now those are, development sites. And so the
Right.
two properties we bought in downtown Long Beach are the same way. That, previously they were much lower density. This ordinance passed, you could do small unit counts, and we have 11% affordable, so we get these various development bonuses. And so we're paying for land at a lower basis than we should be. because we understand the laws. And so that's
Right.
always been, it's a moral thing for me. I care about YIMBY, and I think that's a positive thing for society, but it's also was a business opportunity for
Uh,
us.
And remind everyone, just for the people who, for those who are Gen X, perhaps, that don't know what EMB means. What does
YIMBY
that mean
stands
to
for
you?
yes in my backyard, right? And most people probably know what NIMBY is, which is not in my backyard. And so it's a counterweight to that. And it's a movement in California that's been going on for about 15 years, but really over the last 6 or 7 has gotten a lot of momentum in terms of ADUs, reduced parking requirements,
Hmm.
development bonuses for affordable housing, permit streamlining, that really is, pushing to create more housing because we have a significant housing, supply demand imbalance here in California that makes it so hard for people to live here.
Right, and a lot of it's because of the red tape involved to develop. It's
Totally.
so expensive and time
Yep.
consuming that
Right.
we can only build super high end because it takes 3 years, 2 years to get entitlements plus the build. I mean,
Yep.
it's wild. And
Yep.
yeah, and just a point on your micro units, you are correct. Those are like there should be something between studio and micro unit studios because we manage true micro studios and those are like 290 square feet.
And there's a place for that too. And I think that's
There
awesome.
is, oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. But you have like a great micro or large
Yeah.
micro,
Micro plus or efficiency
micro
unit
plus,
or
yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah.
It's like a
It just appeals to a young urban renter, right? Who
it
doesn't have
does,
a ton
yeah.
of extra space. And, that's also a product type that will probably have a little more stickiness to the tenant than student housing. But,
Hmm.
most people aren't going to live there for 50 years, right? Most people aren't going to
No,
live there for 10 years. But it's for when you're in your 20s and 30s and you don't have a lot of extra space, don't have kids, don't have pets, but you want to live somewhere nice and live somewhere with a good location, but not break the bank. We're excited to be adding that to downtown Long Beach.
and is your exit plan on it? And I know these strains change over time, but is it currently to sell or is it a hold, long-term hold, the micro unit built?
I think for Shane and I, my partner Shane Young and myself, our overall goal is to build up a large portfolio and be real estate owners. On any individual asset, we're opportunistic. I don't think anything is not for sale for the right price. And so when those are complete and
Amen.
stabilized, we'll, and also depending what, our capital partners and
Of
investors
course.
want on a given deal. But yeah, I'd love to own them for a long time. I think Long Beach is really coming up and it's kind of the last affordable beach city and we've had a ton of development and it's even getting less affordable because there's a lot of momentum downtown and cool restaurants and what Mayor Rex Richardson's doing with the
Hmm.
entertainment beach and last night at the State of the
Right.
City announced they're doing a big amphitheater by the Queen Mary. They've got the Warped Tour is coming back and it's going to be in downtown Long Beach. They have a
Ah,
country concert there. They got the Grand Prix. There's a lot of stuff
right.
happening down here. It's a cool
Right.
place.
That they just redid that old historic hotel. I think that just
The
reopened or
Fairmont
is about
Breakers.
to.
Oh, it's super
Yes.
cool. Yeah.
Have you been there? I haven't been there yet.
I haven't
Is it?
stayed there, but I went to dinner there and yeah,
Uh,
awesome.
yeah. We had.
The true 5 star. And then they're building a Hard Rock hotel, right? I can see
Yes.
it from out my window. I can't
That's
see it, but I can
awesome.
see where it's going. So
And then I hear that, I mean, just to plug some more Long Beach, I mean, the Olympics are coming and and what I understand there's
mhm.
going to be quite a few events down here.
They're going to have like 10 or 12 events throughout Long Beach. Yeah.
Right.
It's going to be a real
Huge
time.
opportunity. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
going to be cool. Looking forward
Yeah.
to that.
It's a pro housing city. It's a pro development city. We don't have a ULA thing killing development like LA does. So
Hmm.
it's really on the come up. Yeah, I live here. I love it here. I moved here after USC just because that's where Bogey's office was, the Marcus Millichap office. But
Right.
I've been here pretty consistently ever since, and I love
Right.
it.
That's right. The Marcus and Millichap office was in like a pretty big building
It was in the
downtown
World
Long
Trade
Beach, right?
Center. Yeah,
Yeah, it's in the World Trade. That's
we're
what it was.
yeah, YoungLewin's in the Wells Fargo building on First and Pine here. But
No slouch.
yeah,
Not to be undersold.
yeah.
So tell me, Dan, what trends, since we're talking about student housing, what trends in the student housing market do you see shaping the future of the niche?
Good question, Trevor. I think trends in the student housing market, I really can only speak for the markets that I work in. I'm not a, nationwide research kind of guy. But at USC, it's a flight to quality, quality locations, quality product, right? Good sized bedrooms, all master bed bath, but also, good sized common rooms and good sized living room,
Mm,
kitchen, and an outdoor space if you can do it. At USC, when I started brokering, there was so much less supply. And so just having something that was new or lightly renovated was meaningful. Anything that had even close to bedroom, bathroom parity was meaningful. Now there's been so much, there's still 25,000 kids at USC, and it's still the University of Spoiled Children as we get, accused of. So the budgets are big there, so they're good
right,
tenants, but people were going and they were going, further out. There's Vermont, and then there's Normandy, and then further west, and people started crossing that border, and it's so far from campus. When there was no supply, that would work. You go south of
right,
Expo Boulevard, that would work. Now, as so much supply has come in, USC's grown enrollment, but not dramatically. The
right.
stuff that's close to campus is well done. That'll get tenants, and bedroom bathroom parity. Everyone has their own bathroom is key. And then
Mm,
also a trend for a while was jam as many bedrooms as you can, and so take the living room and convert it to a bedroom. And in your spreadsheet, that looks great because you get an extra bedroom's worth of rent. But what I'm observing in the market is those are the properties that are starting to get hurt, particularly if they're both too far from campus and have
mm,
a tight, common room space. Those
right.
are the ones that are starting to struggle. Now it's LA, there's always going to be tenants for them, but you're looking more at the, 1,100, 1,200 a bed floor with conventional tenants than the 1,500 to 2,000 rent of the student market.
See, so you're saying it. So just to sum up what you're saying from just kind of like in the USC market, we'll keep it right there to the niche. You're saying the trends in student housing is coming back from the like sardine, like, I mean, we lived in some places that, like old Victorian houses that were barely habitable looking backwards. Like I'm like, man, they
Right.
would
You didn't
pack
have
like
any
four,
choices. You
two
didn't,
bunk beds in
you
each
go up
room.
there now and you look at everything from the Lorenzo down to the Ventus project, the Landmark project. It's all, 7-story Class A apartments. So students have choices.
Yeah.
And the Victorian house that's renovated is still cool. Kids are still going to like living there. And that's,
These were
part
not
of the,
renovated. These were just painted.
yeah, right.
They were probably should have been red tagged, but we were
Yeah,
renting them. You rented
right.
double rack like
If you're in
military
that
racks.
core Menlo, Ellendale, Orchard area, yeah, you're still going to get tenants. But if you start to go further out and you don't have it renovated, it's not an automatic slam dunk anymore. And so it's
Mm-mm.
rewarding the good operators and the
Yeah,
people that were sort of the interlopers, I think, are the ones who are more getting overstretched. But yeah,
yeah.
do a good job with your product. And
That's
I
good to
think
hear.
nationally, that is the trend as well of, amenities and highly amenitized communities, and student housing as an asset class over the last decade has become
Hmm.
a lot more mainstream, right? And just like it has,
Yeah.
micro at USC. So I think, to that end, with that comes institutional money, with that comes, brings
Mm.
legitimacy to the asset class and the assets in that asset class, but it also brings competition. And so yeah, you can't get complacent.
All right. Yeah. Keep redefining your business model, right? Like keep
Yep.
kind of. That's. I mean,
Absolutely.
and I just want to say thank God you're doing what you're doing down there because I know there's some I had fraternity brothers that lived like on 30th Street, like
Hmm.
or and in like the blue house or the green house or whatever the heck
Yeah.
house it was that would be passed down, and those places were one step above like a shelter.
Yeah.
I mean it was like, how is your toilet on the second floor not working, and what is that? And
Yeah.
I was,
No, the
just
owners, that's all
yeah,
gone now, or for the most
yeah,
part.
it
The
is,
owners
but
up
that
there
was
are pros. The guys are really good. Yeah.
and it was like, I'm like, if my daughter went here and was living in this, and we're paying what
Yeah.
$400,000 to go to school, and they're paying
Right.
this much to live in a like shack. It's crazy. That's what that was the way.
Yeah.
That's what it was at USA. It's funny. I'm glad that it has changed, and I'm glad to hear that you are part of that because that needed to happen. It's just,
I shouldn't get the credit for it. It's the developers and the owners up
hey,
there.
you had a
I
piece of it
help.
in it.
Yeah.
I'm just from an observational perspective. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Because I hope my daughters go there one day, and like maybe in one of your buildings. So I just thank you.
There you go.
What advice, Dan, would you give aspiring real estate investors wanting to start out in multifamily or student housing markets?
I guess to investors or to brokers, I mean, the advice I'd give to brokers,
Investors.
agents, people who want to be get in the business is find a good mentor, but really above everything else, work hard and earn the mentorship because
Earn
the
the mentorship.
yeah, you're not like I remember when I got to Marcus and Millichap and I was sort of waiting for Bogey to, call me in his office and tell me the secrets of the business and kind of figured out that's not how this works, because A, he doesn't want to and but B, he can't. He can't just tell you. He has to show you. You have to go out on meetings and see see him in action and so you earn the mentorship by working hard, by booking meetings, by, booking opportunities and you know, getting out in the field. That's where the learning happens. Nobody is incentivized to just sit down and show you all the ropes. At Marks and Millichap, you have a sales manager who tells you what a cap rate is and how the basics work. But so to young investors, yeah, or young brokers, that's what I would say. To young investors, I think I would say, understand that as the general partner, as a syndicator in the ecosystem, you get paid last. You get paid for creating
Hmm.
value. So you don't just get to buy a property and sort of do a mediocre job and then get in the money, right? You're bringing money from other people. You're investing, and so I think to go out on your own as an investor, especially if you're syndicating and using other people's money, have a niche, have a business plan, have something that you're doing that differentiates you and makes it worthwhile and sustainable and not just buy and hope it goes up. The buy and hope it goes up plan, if you're a wealthy doctor and your, brother's a doctor too, and you buy one apartment every 2 years and yeah, that's a path, right? But if you're not a wealthy doctor or a dentist or some other, you know, independent W-2 job that you're just investing into real estate, if you're active in the game, you got to have something and you got to have multiple things, whether that's, operations, management, execution, development plan, buying it right. A lot of different ways to add your value, but understand you have to add your value. Otherwise, you're just a spectator.
Absolutely, Dan. And I think you said something in there, something that I wanted to hinge on. It doesn't, you were saying young investors. I mean, it can be any investor. Sometimes it's just somebody who never has touched the industry, like in healthcare. Like you said, doctors.
Yeah.
Doctors, they couldn't tell you what a cap rate is, or like, they hardly know what's going on. The ones I know, they're just like, how does it work? And they can, where would you suggest they invest, right? Like they don't want to start a syndication, but they want to get in. I mean, I would imagine they would call you, right? I mean, because you take outside capital and put it together and put it do a
Yeah,
development
I
project. I mean,
mean, I think if you're in that position,
just
you
to get
kind of
some
have
kind of experience.
two ways you can go. One way is buying apartments or office, industrial, any kind of commercial real estate at a low leverage. You're not going, that's a slow burn of making money, right? You're banking on the long-term appreciation. You get a good
Mhm.
manager, like hire your firm, and hopefully it runs
Thank you.
relatively passively. We take outside money, yeah, from we're a syndicator, so we've got a variety of class A full equity where you're sharing in the upside, but there's downside risk. I mean, not downside beyond your investment, right? We're the ones signing on the loan.
Right.
But yeah, we have a stable of about 90 investors, high net worth
Wow.
individuals who've invested in our 30 projects over the years. And it's passive for them. I mean, there's, nothing for them to do besides read the updates and ask questions if they want to. But because we're doing development, whether it's the micro units or the ADUs, we're able to get more of a 20 to 30% IRR on the
Wow.
deal year over year, because we're executing this niche business model. So if you're looking for the higher return, yeah, that's more of a route to go. Obviously, pitching my own business model here, and I'm happy to talk to anyone, but
Absolutely.
also there's other guys out there, and lots of ways you can do that. But yeah, we think we've got a pretty good model here where we're working with some inside
Yeah.
knowledge how to maximize these laws and have done it now for 5 years since really focusing on it almost full time. That yeah, we think we've got a good thing going.
I think you got a damn good thing going, man. I mean,
Thanks.
you know the spot down there. You're focusing in a place you lived for 4 years, like
Yep.
straight up at USC. I mean, being down there is no more. I have a good friend of mine who's a lieutenant colonel in Air Force. He was a fraternity brother, pledge brother of mine, and
Still is a
he's
fraternity brother of yours.
say again.
He still is a fraternity brother.
He still is a fraternity brother of mine. He's a pledge brother. Yeah,
There you
he's a
go.
pledge brother of mine. And he would say there is no intel like boots on the ground. Like no matter what comes in, like
Yeah.
there's no experience like the guy that's right there on the
Yeah.
ground, not in the
Well, and that's what's
sky,
so
not
cool
sort of
about real
driving
estate.
around.
Real estate, there's no Dow Jones CNBC stock ticker. It's
That's
all, I mean, there's
right.
CoStar, but that's where brokers and, on the ground, being in the game is valuable.
Right.
And why you can make money, right? There's discrepancies of
Lo-
information.
Local knowledge, right? Like
Yep.
there's things about that USC market that no one could know unless they had lived there
Right.
for 4 years. It's just
Yeah.
inherent. It's inherent to
Well,
you,
and not just
and
living there, but, working the market for the last
right.
years also.
You would get $700 a house from John Ward when you're in
Right.
sophomore. Man, that's crazy. I love that. See John Ward at the high five.
Yeah, you
Uh,
will.
uh, last question. This one's always is on the top of the minds, second to the fires, which is what legislative challenges would you like to see to facilitate? Or sorry, I'm just kidding. Let me
I
restate.
got you. No, I got your
What
question. Yeah, I think the
legislative
legislative
changes would you like to see?
Yeah, the legislative changes at this point, the YIMBY movement, I think, has largely solved in California the upzoning thing that, in the small lot houses,
Eight
ADUs,
units.
9, yeah, SB 10, these different laws. And on the larger stuff, SB 35, SB 2097, all these laws. So the zoning is there. Now it's, I think, the implementation, the permitting, so enforcing, making the NIMBY cities who don't want these statewide laws, forcing them to actually follow the statewide laws.
Mm-hmm.
And I think not just forcing them, but force them to do it in a timely manner. For me, what it comes back to, and I am an investor and a developer, so it informs my view. But for me, as an investor, I'm not going to go to a city if it's too much trouble. Even if the state
Right.
says you can do this, if I have to rely on the state to enforce it and they're a little bit shaky with their enforcement, I'm just going to go to a different city, right? And there are cities that we've done projects in and we've succeeded in getting our projects built, but we will never go back to because it wasn't worth it because how difficult the permitting process was, how, backwards and Byzantine the system was. And so I think that part on the permitting side, forcing cities to stick to timelines, forcing them to give clarity on what it will take to get a project permitted and built, fees, these park fees and school fees that are ever increasing. I mean, I get those are parks and schools are not
Utility.
things, but if you want housing, you're asking them to bear the brunt of it. And so I think that, we talk about having a housing crisis and the legislation, the governor talks about it being a crisis, but it's funny. I mean, it's been sort of darkly informative over the last few weeks with the fires, and they're actually treating it like a crisis, right? They're suspending CEQA, they're streamlining
Mm-hmm.
permitting, and I think there's been a lot of sort of frustration in the YIMBY movement of, so you're admitting that this whole thing was made up the whole time and that you could have changed it, but you're
Yeah.
not. I mean, so we're calling it a crisis all the time, but yet we still have all these different CEQA and regulations and fees and all these different things that really limits it. But then the other big one, of course, is the anti-business climate in California and the anti-landlord. I mean, ULA.
Yeah.
I'm on a thread with the YIMBY people and a bunch of developers, and they're asking for suggestions on how can we rebuild after the fires, and they're looking for technical suggestions. But the email thread has devolved into just everyone saying, we don't build in LA, we don't build in Santa Monica because you have this regressive transfer tax. It just makes it so it's impossible to do it. That's what
Right.
really kills housing production. It doesn't matter how many upzoning regulations you put in place until you solve that, it's
And
only going to be moderately effective.
it, you threw out a couple of acronyms there, like the CEQA and ULA. Would you mind just defining them for the sake of those of us
Sure.
those who don't
CEQA is
know what
California Environmental Quality Act, and it's you have to get these environmental studies done for any project of significant size, and it's expensive and time consuming. And, it makes sense in certain situations if you're building out in the middle of a, untouched environment when you're building infill and urban in
Yeah,
town.
brown zones or something, right?
Right,
Right,
we
right.
don't really need this, and then ULA. I don't actually know what ULA stands for, but it's the mansion tax, the
Mansion
transfer
tax. Right.
tax that they call it the mansion tax, but the problem is it's on anything over 5 million. So for a single family, that's mansions, but for apartments, that's just standard apartments, and so
Right.
nobody's really that interested in building large new construction in LA and Santa Monica because of those misguided transfer taxes. Yeah,
And no one wants to sell their buildings that are above like 12 units either.
right.
It's stopped all transactions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you make a very good point that it's like the if it is a crisis, declare it as such and get out of
Right.
the way.
Right. Well, don't
Right?
just declare it because we've been declaring it, but put your money where your mouth is and
We
act on
actually do something, act on it, right?
it.
Yeah, like they're
Right.
doing, like
And when
they're
it is a crisis,
out
and it
there,
absolutely is a crisis in the Palisades right
100%.
now, but
Altadena as
if it's been
well.
a crisis this whole time,
Yeah. Why
treat
is
it
it?
as such. And obviously they're only serious to a point, and until they get serious about it, housing prices are going to still stay so high in California because of that. There's always going to be demand to be here, so the supply needs to
And
keep up.
and based on the what I read with the amount of construction permits pulled in the last year at an all-time low,
Yeah,
in 2 years it's going to be a whole nother story of like rents going sky high
seems
because
like it.
nothing's going to be delivered. No one wants to build because of this tax, like just as you said. Like, why would you want to build in a place that's like all the red tape involved, never mind the construction costs, right?
And as a developer, as an owner of, commercial real estate in Southern California, that's good for me, and I mean, my support of the IMBY movement
All of us.
is more in my, I guess, how I feel about society and our world in general and my generation, right? I'm 32 years old, so it's a lot of people who are in my sphere are struggling to figure out housing and, how they're going to get their slice of the American dream and how they're going to stay in California. So,
Right.
the IMBY movement, if it actually works, to the extent that we want it to, it will hurt developers. But you take a place like Austin, Texas, right, where that's a big storyline in commercial real estate of how much multifamily rents have dropped there. Well, that's because they did the permitting upzoning thing, but they also have a business friendly climate where you can do it. And so they have built a ton and meaningfully added to the supply. And, with apologies to anybody who's invested in Austin, Texas, because those people are hurting, rents are dropping. But, and I, as a developer, I could sympathize with how that would be obviously negative. But as somebody who's a 32-year-old YIMBY, picturing that dynamic in the markets where my friends live and work, that would be positive. But until you
Right.
open up the permitting process, it's, again, you're not going to make meaningful progress to that end.
Agreed. We have to be able to build housing for young professionals. That's not going to take half their paycheck just to
Right.
rent it, right? And that's what LA is. That's what LA is right now. And there's
Right. Well, and that's the whole, the California exodus and people wanting to dump
right.
California. Oh, people are fleeing the state. People are fleeing the state because it's finally gotten too expensive for them to bear. And, with the various California craziness that's happened over the last few years, it has gotten slightly less attractive for some people. But if rents were the same as they were in the middle of the country, people wouldn't be fleeing California. They're
No,
just,
no.
we can't afford this, so, yeah.
Well, that brings me to the end of my formal questioning here, Dan.
Well,
You've actually, you know, one question I did want to throw out there is, how do you see have you had an experience with the ADU construction, the new law where you're allowed to sell the ADU as a separate house? I guess, like if I built a ADU in my backyard right now, I could sell it as a separate unit. Have you had any experience with anybody going full tilt through that? I have
So
not. I'm
that
curious.
law, you're talking about SB 1033. What
Correct.
that law did was it gave cities the right to allow people to do that, but it didn't mandate it. So none of the cities that I'm in are doing that right now. I
I see.
haven't heard too much of that. I know San Jose up in the Bay Area will let you do that. I've looked at some things in San Jose, but haven't bought anything. So I haven't done that. That hasn't, until they make it mandatory for the cities, it probably won't catch
To
on.
allow sale.
Yeah.
Got it. And then when you talk about cities in your experience, what has been the most pro development cities? I mean, Long Beach sounds like when one of them. But it sounds like
Long
your
Beach is
experience
really
there.
good. We own about 50 co-living bedrooms spread over 3 properties in Redwood City, up in the San Francisco Bay Area. That's right, my
Okay.
hometown.
Oh, okay.
Shane and I are partnered with my dad. He's, kind of a structural engineer on them and active
Yeah.
manager on them, and so that's been really cool. And Redwood City is very pro housing and a really great jurisdiction to work with. So.
There's a red city in a whole blue state, a whole blue area. Sounds
No, no,
like.
Redwood, but no,
But it
it's
sounds
it's
like it's
about
like
as
a
blue as it gets. Yeah.
pro development in blue. And that's a
Well,
almost an
it's
oxymoron.
the YIMBY thing is almost bipartisan. I mean, because you
It
have
is. You're right. You're correct.
Menlo
Correct.
Park and
100%.
Atherton, right south of Redwood City, and that's as blue as they come. But that's where, Steph Curry lives there and is, supposedly a Democrat, but he's writing letters against upzoning in Atherton, because again, it's not in my backyard, right? And so
Right.
yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting sort of
It,
bipartisan on both sides.
it is very, very interesting. I sit right there with you. I'm kind of like in the middle of the generation. I'm 45, so I'm not X. I'm like either really young X or super old millennial.
Yeah,
I'm kind of the shoulder generation. So I see both sides, right?
yeah,
And I completely relate into the YIMBY thing. It's like, build what we need. Don't like buy your house and then hunker it down. Like, if laws free up, it's like it helps everyone if there's more less homeless and more homes.
right.
Right?
It's a
It's
good tagline.
it all right. I mean, it all boats rise with the tide, right? So
Yeah,
it's if we can make the city itself as a state better, it's just going to be better, and
yeah,
not just like these little things. And we can effectuate change. We just as developers, and I used to own a development company for 6 years before I sold it. Like that was about 7 years ago, but it was a similar thing. We were building spec homes, and it would take. I mean, if you want to divide a lot, God forbid you got a big lot and want to divide it and like into
oh,
two, it
so many
would
hoops
be
and jump
two
through.
years, 2 years
Yeah,
of entitlements, like just
yeah,
maybe. And it was like, why? For no reason, and
yeah.
it's paperwork. And so hopefully we'll be
Yeah,
able to get
hopefully
through
that'll
this
be
kind of
progress, but it's halting for sure.
exactly. All right, so this brings us to the last little section of our show here, Dan. What I like to call the
Sure.
rapid fire round. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I want to ask it and be quiet. Try to be quiet. I always have a hard time with that, especially if
Sure.
it's funny. And you talk as much or as little as you like about it, and based on your experience or your opinion or whatever you want to make up. Are you ready, sir?
I'm ready.
All right. What's the best real estate advice you've ever received?
Good question. One that always sticks with me is a developer named Dale Kim up at USC. And did you read the bill? Is what he said to me. And the context of it was I had heard some rumor from another developer about some new thing you could, I don't even remember the specifics at this point. This was pretty early on of, some new way you could get more density out of it. And I had a listing that was a land deal that I was trying to sell Dale on, and I was said, yeah, so and so told me that I think you can do, with using this new ordinance, you can do 5 units instead of three, but I don't really know. And he said, well, Dan, did you read the bill? And I hadn't even really thought of that. I just, would go on these rumors and, people telling me things. And he said, it's written in English, it's posted online, go read it. And, and then tell me what you can do or not do, but don't take, so actually, and so I've kind of used that context for a lot of different things of actually go in and understand, do the research and don't just have a high level understanding. If you're going to be the expert, read the bill. So
I love
shout out to
that.
Dale for that one.
Read
Yeah,
the bit.
that
Read
one
the
has
bill.
stuck with me. I don't, Dale doesn't know that one stuck with me, but it has.
Make sure you send this to him when we're done.
Yeah, I'll have to.
What has been your biggest inspiration in the real estate world, or who?
Um, that's another really good question. And I mean, I have a lot of them, but I will pick one. I think my biggest inspiration in the real estate world actually has been my partner, Shane Young, who I know you know as well. He was on Bogey's team. We started within a week of each other, and Shane is just fearless and I guess the story with Shane that always sticks with me is like it was our first, maybe second year at Marcus and Millichap, and one of the older agents who wasn't actually that active, but he had a couple big clients, and he listed a property, the Pacific Court in downtown Long Beach, which is kind of right here on Pine and Broadway. It's a $90 million building, or at the time it was. It's probably double that now. And they were presenting it at the sales meeting, and there was this whole thing about there's a restricted client list and young guys can't call these people and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, oh, that's too bad. I would have loved to call the big dogs on that, but I don't want to get in trouble. And Shane's like, fuck that. And he called Greystar and he represented Greystar on purchasing that building. And that one always stuck with me, along with many other inspiring things Shane has done. But just the sort of ignoring the things that will slow you down and just going for it is really inspiring and cool, and why he's, $1 million a year broker, and why he's been such a great partner to me in the development and the brokerage side of it. So yeah, and just the work ethic from him, and having a guy who was with me in the cubes till 9 o'clock every night at M&M, but combining that with that fearlessness, yeah, was a great inspiration among many great inspirations. This is rapid fire, so I can't list them all, but Shane's number
Love
one.
it. Love it. Shane's number one.
Yeah.
Shane went to SE as well, right?
He went to Long Beach State.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, Cal State Long Beach.
I feel like he should have went to USA. It feels like
Spiritually,
he
yeah,
feels like he
spiritually he's
did.
a USC guy, but literally he's a Long Beach
Got
State 49er.
it. All right, number 3. What's a personal habit that you keep that keeps you on track professionally?
A personal habit that keeps me on track professionally is thinking about my time in dollars per hour, and thinking about high dollar per hour activities, and delegating what's not high dollar per hour, letting things go if they're small dollar, dollar issues, and trying to map out my activities in a way of, is this going to be worth, I set a business plan and a goal for how much I'm going to make this year. I work 50 hours a week for 50 weeks a year, so that's 2,500 hours. And so if I'm trying to make $2.5 million a year, my time's worth $1,000 an hour. And so am I working on the right activities? Obviously, there's limits to that analogy, but I try and kind of stick to that. Yeah,
Because outsource the minimum wage activities, right?
for
Sort
sure.
of thing.
Yeah, and it's easier said than done, but it's crucial.
What's a skill you wish you had mastered earlier in your career?
A skill I wish I had mastered earlier, I think, is not caring what other people think, not fearing rejection. That I was not the best cold caller, especially early on, because I cared too much. And, again, I should just call Greystar and not worry about the manager getting mad at me, or Greystar saying, "Who are you?" Shane's going to go close a six-figure commission while I'm thinking about what people are going to say if I do that. And so that, I guess, is related to that story earlier. But yeah, just block out the noise and chase your goals.
Love it. And last question. If you can invest in any real estate market outside of California, where would it be?
I'm so California focused, man. Yeah, I mean, I love California, and I've got, interests in the Bay Area, and I've got interests here in LA and Orange County. And I feel so blessed and privileged to have been born there, and born here. We've got the weather, we've got, I think, a culture, that is
Mm-hmm.
sort of, as it's funny because California is not real America to a lot of Americans, especially lately. But I think that the West Coast, it's all the people who, the history of the pioneers and everybody coming over and making a new life. It's much more upwardly mobile. And, I think you've got Silicon Valley, which is the center of the world in terms of tech, right? And you've got
Right.
Hollywood, which is the center of the world in entertainment. So you've got two centers of the world. We're, on the West Coast, so we're closer to Asia, and that's, where the world is going, and the growing market. And we've got beautiful weather, and obviously it can be destructive, as we've seen recently, but overall it's hard to beat it here. And we've got problems, but to me our problems are so fixable, and they're so, we don't have to do anything extreme. Just don't let people shoot up in the streets. don't let
Yeah.
shoplift and let them get away with it. These aren't like that's why I'm so bullish on California is we need the pendulum to swing back, but we don't need it to swing like way back. We don't need to become some authoritarian state. We just need to kind of rein in the craziness a little bit. And it seems like things are swinging that way. So I'm just so bullish on California. So I'm sorry,
Uh,
but I'm going to decline to answer. Yeah, and just pitch how
that
much I love
is
California.
that is absolutely fair. Like, and I love what you said, and I said I wouldn't comment, but I have to. It's like, oh, easiest thing in the world, California. Step one, enforce the law. If we just
Right,
enforced our laws that said no camping on the streets after on the sidewalks and things like that, if we just enforce the laws, we
right,
would be in a whole different place.
right.
Like,
Yeah,
if all the cities just enforce the laws that are already in place,
yeah,
don't put new ones, just enforce what's there,
right, right,
and we would be it'd be a different. And don't make it political, just enforce it.
right. Yeah, that
And
that could be the subject of a whole other podcast.
oh,
And
completely,
we could
completely.
go on and
I
on,
hear what
but
you're saying. It's like it could be fixed just by saying, all
we've
right,
got
you know what,
we've got
fix it.
so much going for us, and the stuff we have
Right.
that's is so fixable. So
So
I
fixable. Right.
fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I grew up here too. I'm with you. Like I'm not a transplant. I grew up out in the middle of nowhere, uh,
yeah,
and went to USC and stayed here. Traveled the world for 7 years and ended up back here. I saw 41 countries, but still ended up back here despite everything else. And
yep.
it
I'll
it
split
it
time between the Bay Area and here, but I don't have any desire to live anywhere else.
right,
I love the
right.
cold.
I mean, yeah, because you get both. You get the clouds and the smog, whichever pick one. Well, that's the end of our show, Dan. I really truly appreciate coming on and spending your time with me, man. It was a great conversation. I learned so much about student housing. Thank you for your sharing and
Thank
giving us a
you.
look at
Yeah, I
what's
had a great
your
time.
company. And
Really appreciate it and what you're doing here.
thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. And that's a wrap, my friend.
Cool.